All right, we're live.
Great.
Hi there.
So everyone, sorry for the delay, and thank you all so much for joining us on our How to Host Events webinar. Right now, we're joined by two freaking amazing people, actually three. We're joined by Cris Sardinia, who's the Executive Director of Desiree Alliance. If you want to wave or introduce yourself. And then we're
I
also...
think I can.
We hear you, girl.
Fuck me. Okay.
Are you there, Cris? Can you hear?
No.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So I'm cussing this fucker out. Okay.
And then we're also joined by Piccillo, who...
Julianna, Piccillo.
Thank you.
Julianna, it's a hard one.
Who is one of and then Julianna bottom lined organizing events with SWOP-Tucson, and then also prior to that, she was one of the co-founders of the Sex Worker Art and Film Festival. So we're joined by two amazing people who have incredible experience with event organizing. We also have Savannah Sly on hand, who's going to be helping out with this webinar, grabbing all of your questions and making sure they get answered throughout and then at the end of the webinar. Savannah also has a ton of her own event organizing experience, so we're happy to have her join us as well. We have a list of pre-questions that try to go over sort of the core features that are involved in event organizing, and then but we also really do want your questions, so please do type and ask any questions you have for our presenters during the webinar, and Savannah will ask those for you. The general format of this webinar is going to be Q&A talk style. So are we all ready to get started?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. So for both of our presenters, organizations host a bunch of different events, from conferences to meetings to socials to protests to retreats. So what type of events have been integral to your organization? So to SWOP-Tucson or to Desiree? Like, what kinds of bringing people together have been really, really important for building communities, for getting things planned and done, for your communities? Maybe, Jewel, if you want to start, and then we'll move to you, and then we'll do the reverse, the next one. Is that cool?
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome.
You know, when we started here in Tucson, when I started here, it was really just me, and there was no SWOP yet. SWOP had yet to form. And I think, you know, my tactic was always to do something sort of shocking, creative, and political at the same time. And I was very inspired by Carol Lee, Scarlet Harlot, and she was doing a sex worker film festival at that time in San Francisco. And so I brought her down to the university. I got people to give me some funds from Women's Studies, and we brought just Carol in with some of her films from the festival and showed the film. So, you know, we started out doing kinds of like arts activism is what I would call it, and that got people excited because it was kind of fun, and it was like, at the time, believe it or not, it was kind of edgy that sex workers would do anything as out sex workers and feel like they had any kind of political rights. So that alone was sort of pulling people together and bringing people out for it. So that's kind of, we made it fun and political and creative at the same time, and that's how we brought people in, and it was a slow building process over a period of years. Do you want me to say more, or should we wait till we get to more detailed questions to kind of get into?
No, I think I think let's wait until we get some more detailed questions to sort of dive into that. It seems like we've lost Cris for the second, so she probably had a little bit of tech difficulties and she's back. Okay, actually, hey, Cris.
Oh, Jesus.
So same question. Hello. So same question for you, Cris. And then that question is going to be, what what kinds of things made Desiree Alliance Conference happen? Like what kinds of planning events and stuff were really important for Desiree?
Hear me?
Yes.
Well, okay. Well, first you have to have enough money to start. And we never start with less than $25,000. We have to have that much to at least begin to put a down payment on our venue. And then we have to have we have to have a venue that everybody, is a popular hotspot, like we've had it in Vegas, Chicago, New Orleans, the last one, San Francisco. So this is something that we have to, because people do work. So we have to have it in a city that, people can work without, being, big red target on their back or something like that. We have to have enough money. We have to, wherever we have it, there has to be a ground team in order for, because we are not in one location, we're all over the place. We have to have a ground team at these venues that if we, to help us support this conference in that city. Have the keynotes. What would people like to hear? What is our theme? Last theme was about Southern organizing and the disparities in the South. So we held it in New Orleans. So that's something that's very important also. But money is the main thing. If you don't have money, you're not going to have this conference. So we always try to start with $25,000 because these venues, this one cost us close to $100,000. So we rely on that. And if we don't have the $25,000 to start with, then we don't have a venue until we do.
Yeah, we do things in a much more low budget way when I've done my festivals here, just because we didn't have access to that kind of money, and the idea of anybody giving that kind of money to sex workers 20 years ago was, in my mind, was pretty impossible. So we negotiate a lot of freebies and try to find people who are allies who will donate space. And it's a crazy way to do it. It's super stressful. I think Chris's way is far more sensible. To start with a lot of money. But when we started 20 years ago, we had nothing. I brought Carolyn through the university, gave me enough money for her plane ticket. And, we housed her at one of our friends housed her, wasn't me, somebody did. And we fed her, and, that's kind of how we always did it. We've always just worked with community partners to get free space and anything we can for free.
Awesome.
That's another thing. We do too. Anything I could give for free, good for us. And yes. That's one of the main things that we do. And we don't pay our keynotes. We do fly them out. We, house them and give them some food money. But that's the first thing I say. Hey, we can't pay you, but would you be interested in speaking with Desiree, for Desiree? So, that's something that we try to get everybody and everything for free as much as possible anyway.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then, so you guys have started touching a little bit on how what is required to organize an event. But, starting with Cris and then moving to Julia, can you start from 2 years before the event to the event? Like, give us a 3-minute spiel of how Desiree happened this summer, right? So,
okay. What we did is we chose our venue, and and then we hit Women with a Vision up, as well as Breakout Youth in New Orleans. We started the year before. Our conferences are always in July due to academia, and also the kids are out of school. As you know, we provide childcare. So it is a family-friendly event. So we always, I approached Women with a Vision first, because you can pick a venue and a city to host it in, but if you don't have a ground team or support in that area, then you're not going to have a conference. So that's the first thing I did, was approach. In fact, I took a trip down there the July before, the previous year. It takes us about a year to organize this event. And so I went down to meet with Women with a Vision and Breakout Youth to see if they would be on board. And one of the things they asked me is, why do you want it here? Why not? You know, for all the reasons. So that's something, you know, once you get your ground team on board, then you can move from there. And then we started, I went through the tourism board this time, and they offer a kickback depending on what you spend at the hotel. And then I started, and then from there, they gave our information out to all the hotels in New Orleans, which began to email me with, and I also went through to other hotels and on their website, you know, put in a proposal. So that's another thing I did. But, you know, we try to find the cheapest, the biggest bang for our buck. You know, what are you going to, you know, what are our perks for doing it with you? How much is this total going to, you know, what's the total? And, you know, so we give that information about how many people you think are going to be there, you know, and then they give us a bid. So luckily, we've got the best bid happened to be on Bourbon and Canal Street with the Crown Plaza. And so that's something, you know, we look at, how much money do we have? How much money do you think we're going to generate from registration? Because in the end, we rely on registration in the end. I mean, that pulls us through. This time we had about $30,000 to start with, and you know, we pulled through with the rest of our with registration and a few other grants that came through for us. So and that's how we start it. We start with the ground team. We approach them, and if the ground team is on board, then we start looking at venue spaces.
Yeah, as we started to build, we would meet together, all the sex workers in town, which would start out being just a couple and a couple allies, and over the years it grew to more and more. But we just get together. Our events are really different than Desiree's in that Desiree is a sex worker event. It's for sex workers, right? And our events are sort of, it's for sex workers, run by sex workers, featuring sex workers, but it's to educate the general public and to build our allyship. So we don't have to fly in as many sex workers as Cris does. We fly in the sex workers who are performing and presenting, but we draw, you know, usually a few hundred people locally at least to our events, because we're trying to get, you know, the general public on board with sex worker rights issues. So we meet, people decide what would be really fun, what's an issue that we have to address, what do we want to talk about, what's pressing, what's going to be, you know, we just mix it up. We have some shock, we have some education, we have some academic, we do workshops, performance, we do film festivals, and then we put together a rough budget, and we've gotten funding through the local arts council. The Tucson Pima Arts Council would give us like $3,000, you know, so we'd get $3,000, and then we'd gamble that we were going to make enough in ticket sales to our bigger events to pay for the other expenses we were incurring, and we always made it, you know, but it was pretty tight at times.
Barely. I know.
Yeah.
That's us too. It's like, I have to sell my
a lot of gambling, risk taking going on.
We've got a couple.
Sell my gin, so
We've had another presenter join us, I see. That's awesome.
Yay!
Is that Kim?
No, it's not Kim. I was talking about the fabulous person on your lap, Cris, who I recognize from Desiree.
Oh, Rue?
Hey, Rue, that's right.
Here.
Rue was at Desiree.
That's right, she was.
Hey, I got a couple of questions.
Granddaughter, yeah.
I got a couple of questions about event spaces from the audience. One is very specific, and maybe Juliana, you could speak to this, is what kinds of spaces would you recommend for people who are looking to get into sex worker arts activism? Are there spaces that you find have been especially favorable for that? And the other question is, well, actually, I'll let you answer that, and then I'll ask the second question. Go for it.
Okay. We have great allyship in the GLBT community, of course. And so those kinds of spaces are always very welcoming to us. But also, you know, independent movie houses are really into it. Hipster nightclubs are really into it. Any kind of independent entertainment venue usually wants to do something edgy and progressive. And then, so if they're not doing it because they're into your politics per se, they're doing it because they know this fits the profile of the kind of event they like to host. So we go to indie houses. We have a theater here called the Rialto Theater. It fits at probably a couple thousand people. So when we do our big events, we do it there. We have some clubs downtown that are, you know, the clubs always want us, and we just have to work around their big events. If they have some big money makers coming in, they're not going to prioritize us necessarily. So we gear our dates towards what works with them. Indie movie house in town has been really great for us. And then the queer spaces are just amazing. Independent bookstores, we do a lot of readings in places like that. Yeah.
That seems really helpful for anybody who's organizing a sex worker event. The second question kind of relates to that, like thinking about who are your allies, who's going to be receptive to just the topic of sex work in general. Bella asks, how do you approach people about getting venue space? It sounds like, you know, some of us, we reach out to different venues and they won't even get back to us. Sometimes it's because we're writing from some sort of sex work organization. How do you approach, or how do you cold call venues that might not have any relationship with you? Anybody have any tips on that?
I go in person. I mean, that usually helps. I go in person, I talk to the managers, and anybody in our volunteer crew will do that. Sometimes in your pool of volunteers, somebody has a personal connection somewhere. Often that's the case. So yeah, I go in person and talk to them. And, you know, I think at this point, sex worker rights are kind of trendy, people think it's kind of cool. Yeah, certainly like mainstream hotels might be weird about it. I mean, Cris amazes me that she gets to pull these antics in mainstream hotels. I think it's so cool. But I think if you go to indie rock and roll clubs and punk clubs and places like that, and you go talk to them in person and they see you're a real person, you know, I think usually people are pretty great. I haven't had too many people reject us, honestly. Maybe Tucson's a little bit more progressive than some places.
And then, yeah, I mean, going off of Chris's ability to get hotels to host a, you know, residential sex work convention. So what are those conversations like, and how do you convince these hotels that, like, yeah, having a bunch of sex workers stay at their hotels, probably work out of their rooms, like take their shirts off at the swimming pool, because we all know that happened in 2013. Like, how do you convince the hotel that it's all going to be okay?
You know, like in Vegas, we had to, in 2013, I actually had to meet with the whole fucking staff. And that was the worst fucking venue I've ever been to for Desiree Alliance. I mean, that ran block all the time, you know, against management versus the sex workers. But this venue was really, you know, I just plain out tell them this is what we do. No, we're not save and rescue. We're pro-sex work. We don't promote prostitution, and or we don't promote, you know, we don't encourage people to work, and they know. I mean, sex workers, I mean, the very first thing, but, you know, I give them our website. I usually, once I see a bid that I like, then I make the phone call, and then we talk. And then, like, since July, in 2015, I went to New Orleans 4 times, to meet with our ally, with our ground team, as well as the hotel. So that's something, you know, before we even signed signed the contract, I went down there and checked out the hotel and met with her, with the management, and to see if this was the venue, you know, would they be receptive? Would we be receptive? Because I'm not going to have a conference like with a police state. That's what it felt like in 2013. I was constantly running block and I was so exhausted. So I really wanted to make sure that this time that they fully understood exactly who we are. I give them our website, see what we do, see what we're about. You know, so basically that's what, you know, I don't pull any bullshit with them, because the minute you do, then, you know, you might be liable, or, you know, get through. I don't know. I don't even want that. I know that fucked up venue we had in 2016 was SWOP Las Vegas, had a service provider, conference there, and all was well and good. But when we brought in, you know, 250 hoes taking their shirts off and going nuts, slightly different story on that. So this is, you know, I just really let them know, hey, we're sex worker rights, and yeah, we have a ass kicking after party, and you know, that was so I don't pull any punches with them, so they know who we are, and I go down and meet with them wherever our venue is located, because I want them to see me as well. Because like Julianna said, personal, they can see your face and they know who you are as a person, more or less. Because you know me, I'm not one to, you know, schmooze. I'm one to put it right out there, and I want this and I want that and I want this and that and this. And so, you know, basically, usually tell me, you're killing me, Cris.
Hey,
I
Cris.
get what I need.
Hey, Cris, we've got a question about what do you mean by putting in a bid? Do you put in a bid on a hotel before they know that this is a sex worker group? And what's that process like? What does it mean to put a bid in on a hotel?
We ask for their bid. A hotel website, something where it said, you know, you'll look in or something, and then it said put in a proposal. So that's what a bid is, pretty much a proposal. How many people do you think you have? How many, you know, you estimate your conference, how many people are in, you know, how many people I know through registration. And then I have 75 more, the people who just come in. Because to be honest, we've never registration or coming into our conference because of inability to pay. We just don't do. I always add 50 to 75 more that you know, put in a proposal. 300 people, you know, how many rooms do you think you needed? Like rooms where you did the presentations. So I needed 2013, we had there 6 or 7 presents, the main ballroom. So I also, you know, I want 8, and what can you give me for 8 breakout rooms and the and then they in turn give me back the proposal. Cost you basically, you'll get the space for free in major hotels, in almost any hotel. You'll get the space for free, but for the food and beverage. So if we're expecting 300 people on that, like this time, you have to spend $35,000. And when you have, and it's for free, we'll give you the 8 breakout rooms, we'll give you the main ballroom for $35,000 on food. And anybody who's done any events knows dollars is a spit in the fucking palm. So when it costs you $40 of our, you know, fruit and little, and that equal by 300, that's $10,000 a day. When you have 2 meals a day for 3, I mean, it cost us something like $50-some thousand, food alone. So they'll give you the space for the food, and you know, you're spending $42 a person, and that's, you know, have a sandwich, for bread and some meat, and you know, and then you have one good meal, and you know, 30,000. By the time it's over, breakfast every day and maybe 3 meals, that cost us $60,000. So, you know, we had to spend 30. Well, you know, they know you're going to spend more. That many people. So that's what putting in a proposal is you just give them the number, how many breakout rooms you think you'll need, and exactly kind of what you need, the price from there.
Awesome. And then one thing, you know, that we're sort of starting to touch on is the idea of safe spaces for sex worker communities. And we all know that our communities are very diverse. And so what safe means for one group, one person, isn't going to mean the same thing for another person. So maybe, Jewel, if you can touch on a little bit more of how SWOP-Tucson and smaller events you've organized, like what precautions you've taken to create safe spaces. And then, Cris, if you can sort of talk about how you create a safe and welcoming space for a really diverse community at Desiree, and you know, some things people often don't think about when making the space safe for sex workers, and then for sex worker, you know, groups of the sex worker community that maybe are often marginalized, not only, you know, from broader community, but also within the sex worker community. So let's start with you, Julianna.
Yeah. So in smaller groups, I mean, when we meet as planning events or just have our sex worker meetings, you know, people who come to our meetings have to be vetted in some way and vouched for by an existing member, because we've had police try to infiltrate our group and our events, and so we're really careful about that. As far as the making it inclusive, you know, we do a lot of outreach. I work with a lot of different groups in town. It's been a really long process to become a more inclusive chapter, and it continues to be a struggle because activism is often the domain of people who have leisure time and financial stability, and it's people who are more marginalized don't often have those things sometimes, and it's harder for them to want to be an activist or to be consistently involved. So we try to be as inclusive as we can, and we do that by doing a lot of outreach and pulling people in and asking people to speak and contribute and financially compensating people as much as possible for doing it. As far as actual events that we do, like if we do a party or some type of event, a smaller event in the community, you know, we have bouncers, we have safe people that people can talk to if there's an issue, so that it can get addressed right there and processed right there. And luckily we haven't had a lot of bad things happen because of that, I think.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then Cris, if we can go to you, that would be wonderful. You have to unmute yourself though.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, one thing about the big venues is, and in any city and any hospitality with a big hotel, they work hand in hand with law enforcement. Due to all this anti-trafficking fucking bullshit, law enforcement and hospitality work hand in hand. So they know we're coming. Once we sign that contract, they know we're coming. So, one of the things that we do, I can't change that, but one of the things we do on the Desiree site is we have a small tent to, you know, registration. It's not open to the public, it's a private registration. So what happens is we have a little questionnaire. Who are you? Why do you want to come? Pretty much. I don't know. I can't remember what the fuck's all on there, but you know, they have, why do you want to come? So basically, and then I give them the code to our registration site, the password, and then they're able to register on their own. But that's one to, you know, filter out. I've had to actually the lead or whatever they want, you know, I actually had them as an example, hey, we want to come, and I've actually had to filter that out and say, no, unfortunately, this is not your venue. There's plenty of other venues, but rarely have I had to turn anyone away. Time, you know, because once they register, once they website on our website, on the Desiree Alliance website, it'll give you all the registration emails go to me, my personal email. So I see who wants to register. So I get the information on that email, and that way I can kind of filter that out and send them the registration site code and the password and all that shit to register. So that's one way we stay safe. Another way, you know, apparently I had some problems, and I can go into that in a little while on that question, but with the after party as it being open to the public, and people felt threatened by that, and why didn't we advertise that? And so that's something I'll go in. I think that's a question on what you sent me, Meg. I can answer more in detail on that, but that's something that we try to filter through our website and that questionnaire on registration, so that we can keep safe. You know, but it is a public venue. I mean, we don't buy out the hotel. We could, I wish. You know, we don't buy out the hotel. The venue, you know, the venue is not public, but the hotel is. And our after hours, or our after party is public. So, you know, to that question when you ask it, but, you know, there's really, you know, no foolproof way to stay safe. But at the same time, I have 300 people that are sex workers and allies that I constantly have to think of our safety first. What can I do to make it as safe space as possible? You know, and in the past years, we've had you know, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. And this has come from communities such as the trans community or the African American community, and those are the two biggest communities that haven't felt safe. So I did a huge amount. You know me, I'll shake hands and kiss babies all day long, and so that's something I've really outreached a lot to bring that all you know, inclusive space into Desiree, where nobody feels threatened. And I think we really succeeded more this time than any other conference as far as the trans representation and the people of color communities, and as well as communities of color that were our host organizations. So this is something that was really huge and historical for Desiree, that we provided the spaces where people weren't or didn't feel unsafe, or you know, so this is something that we have worked on for years. I've been director for almost 7 years, and that's something that's always at the forefront of everything I do for Desiree, is to be inclusive in all populations, in all communities, in all, you know, all matters of you know, HIV and trans and communities. So as a Mexican American woman, I feel it's my duty, as sex worker rights have mainly been known as, you know, white, middle class, high-end escorting, you know. So this is something that I really tried to change in sex worker rights, and it'll be my last dying breath until I do, that we are all inclusive and we all feel safe with one another. So that's just a little bit about what we do on safety.
That's awesome. And I want to thank both of you. You know, I think that the SWOP-Tucson and the Tucson sex worker and ally community, as well as Desiree Alliance, have just done a really fabulous job in making alliances with organizations so their activism is really intersectional. And I think Desiree has done the same on more of a national scale. So I would really, I guess, sort of, you know, I think something that a lot of organizers, you know, I think that like saying something like making your event inclusive and intersectional and safe is often a lot more challenging and has more parts than a lot of people think. So what are some things that organizers often forget that end up alienating more marginalized sections of our communities? Maybe we can start with you, Jewel, and then go back to you, Cris.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, you have to be doing the work all year long to get to the point where your event is actually inclusive and intersectional. So, you know, in Tucson, we benefited because we got a lot of national publicity when we first were doing these festivals, and so people knew who we were and came to us a lot. But you could do it in reverse. You know, all the social service agencies in town that might work with sex workers might work with street level sex workers or people who are survival sex workers. Every, you know, HIV organization is going to work with that population to some extent. Anti-violence organizations are going to work with that population. Sometimes sexual assault places want sex worker involvement. And for them, they get grant money to work with actual sex workers. So they're more than happy to bring us into the fold. So, you know, here in Tucson, we go and we talk and we train social workers. We go and hang out at drop-in groups for street workers. We go into the community and we're a part of these communities and we're involved in any way that they'll let us be involved. And then in that way we can bring people in. But there's a lot of natural fits and there's a lot of people who want to work with us, who are working with the populations that we would very much like included in this movement and running this movement. So they're out there. You just have to go knock on the door, really.
Okay.
Awesome.
There's two questions that are kind of related to that I want to ask. One is from Bella earlier, is any tips on getting local sex workers to participate in your events? And this might come to more, local events. Desiree is a huge event that's kind of, it's a national event. People come in from all over the place. But locally, how do you activate your sex worker community? And then a question that's also kind of related to that is, once you've activated your sex worker community, how do you reinvigorate the community once they get too busy, too burned out, or just ambivalent about events?
We just shock people. You know, I hate to sound like the Howard Stern of the sex worker rights movement, but, you know, to me, it has to be fun. If it's not fun and it's not pushing the envelope, people don't want to come out for some dry academic talk. Very few people do, but very few people want to come out for another academic, social servicey, intellectual, white people chat fest about whatever to do with sex workers. But if you do a Whores Not Wars dance party for Veterans Day, a bunch of people in the community are going to show up for that, I guarantee it, which is
Awesome
something we've
idea.
done in Tucson. If you do a Whores oil change, people are going to show up for that. So what we always do is we do these events that get a lot of attention. The media goes crazy because they're like, can you believe these whores or whatever we're doing? And then it gets out there. People come to the event. They're like, these people are fun. And then, you know, many sex workers are super isolated. So when they see there's other sex workers out there doing stuff that are organized, it's very exciting for us as sex workers to see we do have a community to tap into. So it takes doing a lot of small events to build your core sex worker group. It takes a period of years, really, because people are very hesitant to come out of the closet. And initially, people can be afraid that by volunteering with you or showing up at these events, they're going to be outed. They're going to be outing themselves. So it takes time to build trust and for people to feel safe to become activists, but do events that are fun, that get attention, that people want to come out and be a part of, and you build community. I find we build fellowship and community that way. So but it's a slow burn. And I think when you do the more academic stuff, you're going to bring in the same kinds of people, and it's not as galvanizing as doing something a little that's deceptively creative and edgy, but is actually very political too. You know, those kind of events I think are more effective. They have been for us.
Awesome. And Cris, do you want to speak to the same question?
What was the question? I'm stoned now.
Yeah, so there's two questions. I think one from Savannah and then one that I asked before. So first of all, what are some things event organizers do that often alienate immigrants, people of color, trans communities, that they don't even realize that they're doing, or that make people feel unsafe at their events? So that's the first question. And then the second question is, how do you keep people coming back?
The one thing we do for outreach is I look at shit. HIV, boom. Who do I know in the HIV community? And then who don't I know in the HIV community? So one of the things that we've done is we make an outreach. Here's our call for volunteers, which always starts strong, and you know, in the end, there's 4 or 5 of us left in a dazed look. You know, it's really hard to do a large event and keep volunteers all the way through. You know, so and then I get crazy because I just, you know, maniacal and want to go on a murdering rampage, as Savannah knows, and I do love you dearly, Savannah.
I love you too, Cris.
So, you know, I picked on Savannah. Savannah was my target. It's like, bitch, you know, but one of the things is so stressful that, but what we did is we had an outreach document as well. Whoever was volunteering had access to that document, and we asked them, please, when you do outreach, if you volunteer for outreach, and you know, and so then we promote that, and then, you know, we have a category in there that says follow-up. Do follow-up after our initial contact. And you know, that I did hella outreach this time. I outreached everyone. Positive results, because we have to go outside of sex worker in order to gain ground. We have to go outside of our own to make people understand that we are human. We have families. We're people. We're good people. We're mothers, daughters, fathers, uncles, you know, aunts, all the cousins. You know, we're humanized. Something that we really have to make. As I travel so much for Desiree and speak and ex-worker rights, I schmooze. And I schmooze, and I'm good at it. You know, I can sell you shoes to go with it. And, you know, basically, I am the bottom bitch. You know, one of the things is I just whore the hell out of this conference. And to different venues, too, Twitter, boom, HIV market. I hit trans communities. I hit LGBT, and that's something on our outreach list as well. We keep while we're organizing. What are we missing? And that gives us also a visual. What are we missing? Who are we missing? Do we need to do more outreach in this area? Who's responding to us? By holding different things at Desiree outside of it, like we had, you know, I held this was the first time that I held caucuses, and I had again caucuses, but different things, like I held a transgender gender caucus. I held an LGBT youth caucus. I held a drug using caucus, fat caucus, reproductive rights caucus, a trafficking caucus. So, I mean, I held all these caucuses that, you know, that I felt that and I felt it was well represented. But that's one thing on the outreach list that I can, you know, glance at and see, who are we missing? Are they responding to us? Are they sharing our stuff? Are they emailing me back to, you know, we want to take part in this? And that goes as well as fundraising too. While you're inviting them, you might as well ask them for money. You know, a whore is a whore is a whore is a whore. I fucking ask them for money too. What can you give us? What can you donate to us? That's another, you know, is on a list. I have a donation list. Who are we missing? Who are we not, you know, marketing to? So marketing strategy as well, and building trust in those other communities that back us, you know, that have no qualms about backing us as sex worker rights. Or am I just too stoned?
No, that was great. That was great. I have a couple of questions here that have come from the audience. One is super practical, and I think a lot of us run into this, and this has to do with creating safe spaces, not just for other people, but for yourself as an organizer. How do you safely promote and facilitate and produce events if you want to work under an alias as a sex worker? Some of us have great connections under our legal names, but those people who know us under our legal names might not also know that we're part of the sex work community. And I know that a lot of people try to navigate this by having a third alias and all this stuff. Do you guys have any thoughts around that?
Well, yeah, I think, you know, we sex workers are the people who have lots of names. You just have another name. But what you do need for your event is that you do need a face. You need a public relations person. So you have to have somebody who's willing to show their face with whatever name they choose. But if they show their face, obviously people who know them in their real life may recognize them, because you want media most of the time. It depends on what you're doing. I target the general public in our event. So, you know, you want media, you want press, and you need a person they can stick a camera in your face and interview you on the 6 o'clock news. So somebody has got to be willing to do that, it's safe for them to be out and they're comfortable on camera and they're articulate about the issues. But otherwise, you know, a lot of people do have an activist name. They have their work name, their activist name, and then their legal name. And there's nothing wrong with that if you can make that work. But being an activist, I think you do increase your exposure, you know, for sure.
I really wish that I had chosen another name aside from my work name to be an activist. If I could rewind a few years, I would have totally picked a third name.
Yeah, I kind of have thought that way too. I've misstepped a few times with that. And I'm like, well, can't undo it now, so.
Yeah, I'm out there. I mean, I don't give a fuck who knows. I do sex work. I smoke weed. You know, I'm an advocate for this. So yeah, I am the PR. Unfortunately, Desiree, I am Desiree. My office is called my TV room / Rue's playroom / my house. So that's something. Desiree is on such a shoestring budget because it's so hard to get funded for sex workers. You know. Lot only because I travel a lot for no pay, just like you know, all of us that are activists do it for little or no money, believe it. One of the things question
the question, well, actually I think that Julianna covered this question pretty well, which is about how to safely coordinate an event.
Okay. One thing that we did with the registration, that we have, what name do you want your badge under? And that's something for y'all site when you go in to register. You know, you have to pay, you know, whatever you'll have to. That is name would you like on your badge? So that promotion of safety and you know, so that's something that we do really think about because we know people work under different names. People, you know, real name revealed. So that's something that we what you know want. What is your preference? Keep that separate from, you know, divulging real names.
Yeah, but if your event is successful and does get attention, you're going to get attention. So somebody's got to be the face of it.
Right.
This next question kind of ties in, which how do you get over the nervous feeling of hosting a large event? And that could be nervousness about the attention it's going to bring, or the nervousness like, is anybody going to show up? How do you guys contend with that kind of producer doubt?
I think it doesn't hit me till it's too late to get out of it. So I go in like being so excited about what we're doing that I'm not thinking like, how am I going to pull this off? And then somewhere partway in where I can't get out of it, Cris may relate to this, like, then I'm like, holy crap, what did I get myself into? But I mean, I think there's safety in numbers. You have a good core team, everybody's working together, and you know that it's not all, although people will always blame the figurehead, like they'll always blame Cris for anything that happens. But you know, you share the work with other people so that you don't feel so alone in that risk that you're taking.
And
cool.
See, that's where you and I differ because it does fall on my shoulders. It all falls on my shoulders. If I fail, and I'll constantly think about that in the registration site because always money numbers are in my head too. We already said. So that's something I think about. And at the yeah, you know, yeah, and I'm just bitch, but you know, I constantly worry about will people show up? You know, will people show up and schedules? You really.
Hey, Cris, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, so I'm thinking that
A lot of times.
If you turn off your camera, it'll take off a little bit of the Wi-Fi usage. So just
you know.
So Cris, if you can just turn off your camera, then we can probably hear you better because the less bandwidth usage will be used to transmit your beautiful image to us. Can you hear me? Maybe not. Maybe not.
I think we're losing Cris.
Oh no. You know, when you plan an event, it's nerve-wracking, but you have to sort of run the numbers and figure out what's the worst case scenario we can survive. You have to sort of do your best guess as to, like, this is where we want it to be, and everything will add, all the numbers will come in line if it's here, but like if the worst thing possible happens, what's the worst thing, and can we survive that? What's that gonna look like? And that sometimes makes you feel a little better about moving forward with the uncertainty of how many people are actually gonna show up. But it's scary, it's gonna be scary, it just is. Start small, build your confidence.
Awesome, and then I'm gonna ask you a few questions about sort of like what you think is crucial for a successful, and let's start with meetings and sort of more organizing events. Like what is a good way to plan a meeting or an organizing event so that people enjoy it, so that people feel engaged, and that so people want to come back?
You know, we always have food, we always have drinks, we have childcare, kid-friendly environment. And we bring in allies as much as possible, because oftentimes allies are more enthusiastic than sex workers about the organizing. So we certainly take help from wherever we can get it. And then, everything is collective. We structure these events in ways so that everybody can feel excited about the event. No one person is the visionary. Because sometimes that can be okay, I guess, if everybody likes your vision, but people need to be invested and feel like it's their vision. And so you have to it has to be this collective, creation. And then you get people to bottom line aspects of it, because there's, even a small event, there's going to be a location that has to be managed. There's going to be publicity that has to be done, a press release that has to be written, posters that have to be designed, a crew that's going to go distribute those posters, maybe somebody who's going to try to get donations for food or Xeroxing expenses or something. So you, as quickly as possible, get people to bottom line different aspects of the event. And so that, again, they're invested and they're in charge of their aspect of the event. And then you have regular meetings and, just keep on top of it.
I noticed you mentioned saying that allies are usually typically, might have more bandwidth to contribute than maybe everybody in our sex worker community. Organizing a bunch of events in Seattle, certainly I've found the same thing, that there's plenty of ally power there to be used. Things seem to get complicated, and I noticed that people in the community can feel threatened or uncertain about how power is being distributed when there are non-sex working individuals who are contributing to our goals. Hey, Cris is back.
Hey, Cris.
So I would love to know, especially when you have mixed environments, if you're throwing a party or an event that's going to have allies and sex workers, how do you navigate that for the safety of the sex worker community? And then when you have allies, who are contributing as volunteers, do you premise that to the rest of the community anyway? Is there any special way that you handle that? I just love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, always it's sex worker first. We're never going to put an ally in a leadership position that a sex worker wants to have that leadership position. Whether it's like getting the donuts. If a sex worker wants to do that, then they're going to do that. Of course, they're always prioritized.
I can't hear you.
To have whatever role they want to have. And then, the allies that we choose to work with are allies that are very well known to us, that we feel very comfortable with us. We have ground rules that we state frequently about outing people, about, in any mixed company, you are never to address the fact that somebody's a sex worker. You are never to use their sex worker name. You're never, it's like, you're never to even say how you know them necessarily if you run into them in a bookstore, because you don't know if the person they're with knows that they're a sex worker. So, we lay out all those kinds of ground rules so people feel safe. But if people ever don't feel safe, that ally's got to go, because it's ultimately a sex worker thing. And for us in the beginning, sex workers were so scared to come out 20 years ago that we had more allies than sex workers for a while, for a couple years, until everybody from Chicago moved to Tucson. And then we had plenty of sex workers here. But, then we ended up over time having the same allies around for a really long time. And sometimes allies are former sex workers who don't want to be out to anybody but one sex worker in the group who they know and trust. So sometimes, a lot of times allies aren't just allies, but they're just not comfortable being out about their background. So sex workers come first, but allies can be very useful, very, very useful. They can educate their communities, they can bring in funds from their organization, and usually they're very respectful and they want to be of service to our community. So they will do a lot of legwork for us. So I love our allies.
Awesome. And, just while we're on the topic of allyship, if there are any allies watching this presentation right now, can you give 2 or 3 tips of what makes a good ally? Like, what are some things an ally should do or not do to be a good ally, in case any allies are watching this right now?
Cris, you want to get that? Did you hear the question? No, I think we're losing Cris again. Did you hear that question, Cris, about allies, what allies can do to be good allies? I don't think she can hear me. Well, of course, you know, allies can't ever out anybody, number one. Allies always have to understand that we know what's best for us and that we don't want their opinion about what's best for us. You know, I don't know that I've ever had to correct an ally about that. Allies need to be very respectful in their language. You know, a lot of sex workers are very offended if somebody who's not a sex worker calls you a whore. Cris can call me a whore all day long, but maybe one of our allies, I don't want them calling me a whore. Like, I'm not comfortable with that. So, you know, they need to be respectful. They need to be humble. They need to take a back seat and know that they're there to support and learn from us and provide support services. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. And I think we got Cris back too. So if you want to give 2 or 3 tips in terms of what it means to be a good ally. All right, or we had you for a sec, but I'm not sure if you're still. So Cris, we're gonna keep on trying to figure out how to get you back on this. But in the meantime, I'm gonna ask Julianna another question.
I've got some questions from the audience, actually.
Beautiful.
Specifically about December 17th. There was one question about any tips you guys might have for incorporating what we're talking about here to December 17th. And there was a specific question about whether you feel that December 17th should be a private sex worker only event or more of a public thing to spread awareness. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
We've done both in Tucson. If people want to do a private thing, we do a private thing. Sometimes we do like a private segment of it and a public segment of it. So, you know, we make it public most of the time, and we've never had a situation where anything disrespectful or disruptive to our grieving and celebrating people's lives and the thing that we do at in that moment. We've never had anybody come in and disrupt that who was not a sex worker. And we've had family members come in who had a family member who was a sex worker killed and came very quietly because they wanted to honor their loved one. And they were an outsider. They didn't know anybody else there. And, you know, in chatting with us, you know, shared why they were there. So we felt really good about being able to provide that meaningful, respectful moment for their loved one. So yeah, I do think it's important to make it public. And we do have bouncers at our event. We always have people on the perimeter prepared to deal with anybody who did show up who was not a safe person. So I like doing it publicly.
Yeah, we've done the same thing in Seattle in terms of having a private segment and then a public segment. Sometimes what we've been doing is starting private and amassing all of our people and getting amped up, and then we go and we do our public segment. Mm-hmm. And then we come back and it's just for sex workers or very close members of our community, like family members. And we do a private thing. So
yeah, it's a great opportunity to educate too. So it's good to have some public piece. Like we've done big performance art pieces in the, you know, out in front of the public library or in front of the police station. And then we disseminate a lot of statistics and stuff. So we like to get some coverage around the issue because the issue is, you know, very important. Sex workers are dying. But yeah, the private piece, it ends up always being pretty private once we go to a shrine here in town, and it's just us usually and a couple other people. So it works out really well.
Jumping to another question, can you think of a time when something unforeseen went wrong and what you learned from it or how you handled it? Because we can't always foresee what's going to happen.
I think the biggest mistake that we've ever made is not being on top of publicity. Publicity has to start early and be regularly attended to. So, because you can have the greatest event in the world, but if you don't get it to the various press outlets in time for them to do something with it, or make, just announcement deadlines, whatever, that's the biggest mistake that we've made, is being a little bit last minute at times with our press coverage. So doing that early is really important.
Hey, Cris, can you hear us? Testing, testing. Cris Sardinia.
All right, I guess we're still working on it. I'm thinking it's a bandwidth issue.
I think it's a bandwidth issue too,
which is always a pain in the butt.
But we're getting to the end of our questions. We've covered a lot of what we wish to cover.
One question is, what are some things people don't realize about organizing a big event, right? Like, what are some things that, like, people look at a big event and think, oh, this is going to be easy, I know how to do this, but they don't know, that kind of thing.
It sucks up every minute of your life for a really long time. I did the Sex Worker Arts Festival here, sometimes alone, sometimes with a co-director, for 4 years. And I got my hat's off to Cris, because I couldn't do it anymore after 4 years. It consumed my whole life. Like, there's so many details, and at the end of the day, whoever the directors are the bottom line. So whenever one of your volunteers drops the ball, you've got to pick it up. And there's just a million trillion things going on. People's travel schedules, hotel rooms, food, venues, contracts, publicity, media is calling you nonstop for interviews and sound bites, and you've got to be available for that. Equipment doesn't get where it needs to be for the event, and you're handling all these other things, and then you've got to figure out where your AV equipment is. There are so many things that it is an overwhelming task, and that sounds like a thing that I'm dissuading people from doing it. I wish more people would do it, and like Cris is doing, because I can't do it anymore in Tucson, and I keep hoping other people are going to pick it up and do it. But it's really hard, and not a lot of people have time to do all what's involved in doing a really big event. So sometimes it's good to just do periodic smaller events just to keep it going.
Awesome. And then another question is, what is something that can go, list something that went horribly wrong that you weren't expecting at one of your events.
Oh, we covered that, Meg.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was talking about how publicity, you got to be on publicity early and ready for it, otherwise you're going to miss it.
Or actually during, I'm sure that there are many examples that we all have of things that went horribly wrong during an event, right, that we didn't plan for, that just came up. And then, so how did you deal with it then, and then what's something that you would have improved about that?
I can't say that's the case, honestly, like, our events have been such a blast and so energizing for people that maybe a lot of small things went wrong, but nothing big went wrong, I can honestly say. I guess we've been lucky in that regard, but yeah, it's always so worth it when the event happens, that bringing everybody together, it's such a celebration. It's so beautiful. It's so fun. Yeah, I can't think of anything. We had one bad thing happen. I don't know if this was horrible, but we were doing a fisting workshop, and we had gotten all of this national publicity because a Christian news outlet picked up on the fact that the university and the city had partially funded our festival. So they went all over the media and said, that our tax dollars are paying for fisting workshop. And, we were on the Bill O'Reilly show, and Dr. Laura said I was recruiting college co-eds to be hookers. I mean, we were just raked through the coals in the media. And so that when we had the fisting event happen, we knew that the police were watching us very closely, because in our city, anything you do for the purposes of sexual titillation is considered a prostitution and is arrestable. We were truly doing an educational, at that time, fisting 20 years ago, again, was really hot, maybe less than 20 years ago, but 15 or so years ago. And like everybody was fisting. On Our Backs magazine was constantly having pictorials with fisting. And we were like, let's do a fisting workshop and show people how to do fisting safely. But so our model backed out because both models backed out because they were afraid of being arrested. So, and there was a cop in the audience. Somebody stepped forward and volunteered to do it and said, I will do it. You can fist me. And then somebody in the audience said, that's the cop, and pointed at him. And the guy jumped out of his seat. There was about 100 people there. He ran out of the venue and like tore down the block. But that was good. Wow. Because he was gone. And then we had a new model and we were able to do our fisting workshop. So it worked out.
That's pretty incredible.
It was cool.
Pretty incredible story.
And then, I can talk a little bit about, since Betty was originally going to be on this panel, about something that's gone, or a few things that have gone horribly wrong with SWOP Chicago stuff. There was this one time where we organized this massive fundraiser, and we had the venue, and it turned out the night of the 2 days before the venue that the venue was double booked, and the venue was double booked with an event by one of the co-op members who owned this space, so they had priority. At this point we had already sold maybe $4,000 in benefit tickets, right? And I am crazy anal retentive, and Betty is like the most amazing, chill, relaxed, like, it'll all work out, it's all going to be fine person. And I was freaking out about this. I'm like, no, we sold specific tables, like this is going to be a disaster. And I would say, Jewel touched on this a little bit when she was talking about maybe some of the benefits of organizing, in the way that Cris is able to with larger amounts of funding. When you're getting stuff for free, this stuff can happen, right? You can lose your venue at the last minute. You can get co-scheduled at the last minute, right? And there's not a lot of leverage in lee room, right? You don't sign a contract with something you're getting for free. Or even if you can. You can, but it's hard. You don't have a lot of leveraging and bargaining power in those cases. Mm-hmm. And then also a lot of informal venues where you might give them a stipend. Those are also the places that are not going to be really formal, where you're going to be pushing them. So I would say that, sort of keep in mind that when you're hosting an event where you're getting a lot of stuff for free, things can go wrong. And the best way to deal with things going wrong is, like, imagine that you are the person attending this benefit, and, oh wait, like, if I were actually just someone attending, I would be happy to have a fun party. Like, this isn't that big of a deal. Cool, there are two parties at the same time. What a great event, right? So don't get too stressed out when things go wrong. Be prepared for things going wrong and just roll with it, is sort of something I learned. And then a second thing is a fist fight broke out at a benefit party at an art gallery, right? And I think, part of this came from, the fact that there was a lot of alcohol in the space, that it was a small, really compact space, and that also SWOP Chicago had been doing a lot of really great legwork in building communities with street-based sex workers, with, nonprofit organizations that are working with, like, people with more marginalized communities who aren't used to attending a very, very formal event in a jam-packed art gallery with a bunch of, like, cis white people, right? So a fist fight happened, and I think that it was dealt with really, really tactfully and gracefully. We had a member of our community who has been doing, basically is a really great friend of one of the SWOP Chicago organizers, Betty, and has been sort of like one of our pseudo social justice bouncers for forever. So getting people from within your community to do a lot of the mediation work and security work, rather than having someone from the outside doing that work. Being really prepared to de-escalate, and having multiple people, right? So, like, everyone from within the core group of your organization be milling around the event and looking out for tension and developing conflict, and being ready to get in the middle and sort of to try to de-escalate those conflicts. And then having some sort of protocols and ground rules, and then trying to, before you even have the event, think like, if we're going to have an event with like 90, if it's going to be, can we have alcohol at an event that's going to be really crowded on a Friday night? Is this going to be a comfortable and safe space? Are we creating a type of environment for an event that is going to promote, drunken fist fights or things like that, right? And just sort of thinking that through before the event even happens. So that's my like micro contribution since Betty isn't here. I don't know, Savannah, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, your bouncers, your inside security can never be trained enough. We had an issue at Seattle Annual Sex Work Symposium just this past year, where we had a crew of we had people who were rangers, Burning Man rangers, and they were also sex workers, so they were really well skilled in de-escalating situations in creative and really personable, warm ways. And they definitely we were having this at a bar, and it was an open party, open to the public, and a huge party. And the rangers were busy. They definitely de-escalated a couple of situations that were, alcohol infused. Alcohol definitely can contribute to some chaos. But then we also had a kink room where people were buying kink experiences. And all those people, there was a Burning Man ranger there, and then there were some people who were also sex workers and who were really, they were like vetted to run a dungeon space, a kink positive space in a safe way. And long story short, there was still an altercation there where there was a disagreement as to what happened, and people left that space feeling really hurt and really unsafe. And so here's another thing: is follow-up to an event is really important. And I certainly learned a huge lesson as to the value of having like a professional mediator and a third party that is not invested in the situation. Having a third party come in to help mediate a conflict that has happened in the past at one of your events is really invaluable. And that's an instance where we really tried our best. We had trained security there, and there was still an altercation, and then we had to follow up and handle it. And we could have handled it better if we had a professional mediator on hand. So lesson learned.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea to have somebody there in the space who can actually process a situation. I mean, to the extent that you can process it if somebody's drunk, like you can't process a lot at that point, but yeah.
And then, I think Cris just said that here, let's go to Cris.
This is Cris. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Cris.
Yeah, so something that went quote-unquote horribly wrong at a Desiree Alliance conference, how you handled it and what you learned.
Hello.
I don't know if we do have Cris.
No. That's Cris? Maybe we still don't have Cris. Sorry about that, Cris. If you want to just write out anything, I can read it out for you if your audio is not working in the chat thing. And then the next question is in general, right? So we talked about like these horrible things, quote unquote horrible things that can go wrong. In general, what can go wrong during an event? Like what before, during, and after? Like what should a new event organizer be waiting for?
Oh, well, everything can go wrong. You don't have your money, volunteers will drop out. So whoever's functioning as the director should be prepared to have to pick up other tasks they didn't count on doing because people flake like crazy. People don't understand necessarily what's involved and they get off to something else and they just completely walk away from something they committed to doing. So you've got to be prepared for that. Yeah, sometimes venues get screwy, and so, you know, got to keep in regular contact with your venues, like constant contact with your venues to make sure everybody continues to be on the same page about what time, what the parameters are for hosting the event. And, you know, people are going to be critical no matter what you do. Once the event is over, you're going to get a list of all the things you did wrong and all the people you slighted and, you know, a million other horrible mistakes you made. And you just have to be prepared for that. And, you know, we usually would do like a post-mortem and we would all get together and talk. And, you know, sometimes it was kind of hard, you know, to have worked that hard and have people, you know, be critical. You know, it was really hard, but, you know, that's part of the process, you know, that's just a part of how things evolve, that people are critical and the young dogs nip at the old dog's heels as they should. And that's how things move forward. And you have to just, you know, try not to let these tensions fragment, you know, the group and the cause. But lots of things can go wrong, but it's like, I think you were saying, Catherine, it's like, you know, at the end of the day, it's a fun event. It's, you know, people coming together for a shared cause. Like, you got to just look at it like, well, this one didn't go so well. We'll get it better the next time. You just can't get too wrapped up in it because there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just got a little message from Cris about something that went wrong, to, you know, add to what you said. What she said was the after party space. Some people criticized the fact that we did not disclose publicly and really visibly on our website registration site and on our tickets that our after party was opened to the general public. You know, the issue was that people didn't understand that by having it public, that it was opened to, you know, local sex workers and allies as well. So, you know, maybe a lesson sort of from that is that people at events, and especially at sex worker only events, right, where there are some parts that are sex worker only, you know, some parts that are for specific groups of the community, some groups that are, you know, some parts where different parts have different levels of openness to different communities. It's really important to be explicit so that people, so that you've forewarned people and so that you aren't going to get lambasted right afterwards for people not knowing exactly what, you know, what was deal. Cris calls it Crucifixion Week. So, you know, right after Desiree conference, you know, she learns and, you know, and hears everything that went wrong that week after the event. She really gets hammered. And I think that, you know, something that, you know, she's adding is that if you're hosting a big event, like you said, Julianna, like, you are going to get hammered. You know, she learned that next time she, like, of course will know that our, you know, and everyone will know that the after party is public. And, you know, we'll have really detailed you know, descriptions of what Desiree Alliance considers to be public. So that was her addition.
Yeah.
Just a note that we're coming up on an hour and a half pretty soon here.
Get off of me, please. Thank you.
Little commentary there from Cris. Catherine, do we have any more questions that we haven't gone through? I don't think that we have any more from the audience. Audience, if you do have any questions, now is the time to ask them.
Yeah, and I'm just going to ask one final follow-up question. Sorry for the rain in the background. There seems to be a thunderstorm where I'm at. But yeah, what are 2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give to a brand new organizer? So maybe someone from a brand new, you know, 2 or 3 people, brand new SWOP chapter or, you know, micro sex worker organizing group that are just getting started, trying to figure out how to organize meetings, trying to figure out what to do for December 17th, for example.
I would say start with something very simple. Maybe do a reading readings are great. They're free. You can usually host them at a bookstore, and you can invite sex workers to come in and read poems or essays or whatever they want to read. That's a good thing to do. If you don't have other sex workers to work with, or even if you do, you know, approach a social service agency about partnering up for with your, or becoming a sponsor for your December 17th event. Ask them if they will help publicize it. If they will, you know, they're usually, like I say, they get grant money to work with sex workers. We're sex workers, we're organizers, but we're also sex workers. So they're going to get paid to come to our December 17th meetings and provide logistical support. Maybe they'll fund paying for t-shirts, maybe they'll fund Xeroxing, maybe they'll make your posters for you. So I would just, you know, start small. Do events that are easy to pull together, and you're going to slowly, every time you do an event, you have a sign-up sheet, you know, where people can get on your email list, and you give people opportunities to get involved in your next event that way. I hear Chris's background.
I know.
It's so tempting. You know, Savannah, do you have any tips? And then I got some tips via message from Cris Sardinia, so I can read them.
I just wanted to second Juliana's tip to start with something simple, start with something small. I think it's really easy to bite off more than you can chew, especially as you start working towards your event. And as you were saying earlier, Juliana, all the logistics that go into it, how it can consume your life. Even a reading has more logistics than you might realize as you start to put it together. So yeah, starting simple and having a simple but bold impact. And I also love how you were saying earlier, keep it creative. That's what I'm going to take away from this, because I do tend towards the dry academic panels. I feel like that is my mission in life, is to educate very dryly. But yeah, you got to keep it creative, or else people aren't going to come back, and your community is not going to come back out to contribute. So that's good advice.
Yeah, and then Chris's advice is, there are always going to be things you don't think of because of the enormity of organizing. You really can't possibly think of everything that's going to happen, and that could potentially go wrong when you have, you know, and she's speaking specifically about Desiree, you know, when you have over 300 personalities and such, but it's really the same even when you have a group of 3 or 30 or 10 people. You never know what's going to happen. And something is going to go wrong, right? So that is why you have a team to help you. You really need to rely on and not feel like it's just your own thing. You really, really have to be open to sharing responsibilities and working with the team and like going through these issues. You know, when things are going down, it's your team, right? Your team is a really, really important component of your organizing. You know, and then also being really open to suggestions from, you know, to the ideas that everyone on your team are bringing into the community. So, for example, in 2013, there was a big issue with gender-neutral bathrooms, right? So there weren't gender-neutral bathrooms. So, you know, learn from things that you didn't do beforehand. You know, in 2016 conference, Cris Sardinia put into the contract that there would be gender-neutral bathrooms. And, you know, another thing is that you need your inner circle of people to protect you from people who are going to come after you, right? And so those were her little tidbits of wisdom. From SWOP Chicago, I would say, you know, something that's really important, and this is something that I got from a surgeon of SWOP-Tucson, is that you and your organizers, you need to develop, your organizing needs to be fun. You need to make friends with the people that you're organizing with. You need to care about and support your organizing team, and be, you know, it can't just all be business, 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 because those sort of social connections when you're doing stuff on a volunteer basis are what holds things together. You know, and oftentimes in activism organizing circles, we don't really prioritize or include that time for group care and self-care. But doing that and making organizing about team building, about connecting with other people, about making friendships, as well as getting stuff done is going to be so helpful to your organizing work.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm going to screen share right now. This is a picture of Surgeon at our bikini oil change, keeping it fun. That was
That's
an awesome moment. I thought I would just share that with you all.
Thank you. I love that.
Love that.
So,
Perfect.
yeah, it's got to be fun. These people, you know, you got to do this with your friends and have fun and just keep it manageable to build your confidence and build your community. Like if you have nobody, like I had nobody when I started. So I just called Carol Lee, Scarlet Harlot in San Francisco, who I didn't know from Adam. And I was like, I want to bring your films here from your film festival. And, you know, she sent me the films to show. Like, so just, you know, there's all kinds of creative ways to start having things you can do.
Okay, what was the question?
Was what are some tidbits of advice for brand new organizers? Just 3 little nuggets of advice.
Get thick skin. You know, think of the bigger picture outside of yourself. And, you know, be willing to learn, be willing to share what you know. Just because you're a new organizer doesn't mean that, you know, experienced or veteran organizers can't learn from you. So that's something you have to keep up with and get outside of yourself. As with Desiree, I have to think, you know, as practicing self-care, that's almost non-existent when you organize something like this. It can be brutal. Sex workers' rights organizing can be brutal. You know, sometimes we're not kind to each other. I say we tend to eat our own, and there's lots of dynamics because of that reason. But I say be willing to understand the bigger picture of what do you want to accomplish, where do you want to go with this, and why do you want to do it? Is it for selfish reasons? Is it to advance sex worker rights, or you know, what you get out of it is. So that's something you always have to just kind of look outside of yourself and your own ego and your own selfishness, and be willing to bend a little bit. And I'll use Savannah Sly as an example. I mean, I just ate that poor girl up, and she was so gracious. And she finally said, "Hey, man, quit fucking with me." And I went, "Yeah, you know, you're absolutely right. I'm so sorry." And now I just love her to death. And I'm really,
Now we're all cool.
Yeah, and it's just something that, you know, sometimes I get so caught up in the huge part of this organizing, because it is just overwhelming, and it lies all on your shoulder as a leader. And then, you know, you tend to take it out sometimes, and you know, you don't mean to, and then there's other times where you do mean to. And so you really have to just, like, you know, take a breath, take a step back, because we do a lot of this shit for free, and we're so passionate about what we do, and that's something that sometimes you just have to step back and take a deep breath, or somebody near and dear to you needs to say, "Hey, you know, you need to slow your roll down," and make you stop and think about it. So, you know, just think outside of yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you all so much for being part of this presentation. I really personally learned a lot, and I think hopefully the audience did as well. Julianna, I know that you have a folder full of photos. So,
I do.
Yeah, so if you can, just for the last minute or so of the webinar, if you can just sort of click through those, and it can be like an end slideshow.
That would be so
fun.
great. I would love that.
Yeah.
Just takes a little doing to get them to come up, so you got to be patient with me.
Yeah.
If they're anything like that last photo, I can wait around all night.
Me
Not,
too.
not too many like that because I didn't get a chance to get everybody's permission.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one. Let me see if I can go through some others. Here's Emi Koyama at one of, she did like a cabaret show.
And
Here's me at the oil change.
SWOP-Tucson has one of the best December 17th events ever. I always try to make it home to Tucson for December 17th here.
Here's something from our Whores Not Wars dance party. I don't know. This was early on.
We're still on Dead Hookers Are No Joke.
Oh, are we? Okay, let me see if I can get that to come up then. Let me see. Oh, you didn't see Emmy either, huh?
No.
All right, so I think I have to.
Oh, I think we lost her.
No.
Yeah.
Good, but I'm back.
Cris, show us some family photos.
Cris, do you have any, trying to think of what questions we asked while you were out
Fucking around with this thing.
Yeah, while you're having Wi-Fi issues, that would be really useful. Tell me your five sources of cash for Desiree.
Oh
gosh.
Grants and begging. I'll just go to 2. Grants and begging. You know, we really promote it during conference time. I start promoting it immediately. We have a donate button on Desiree Alliance website, www.desireealliance.org, and you can either donate to our general conference fund, or you can donate to our scholarship fund. And this year, you know, we always set aside some money to scholarship people. And this year we were able to scholarship over 60 people. And that was phenomenal. And I know SWOP did a big job on sponsoring a lot of their members as well. So I'm really proud of us. You know, probably 3/4 of the people were sponsored at that conference, and I'm really happy about that. So that's something, you know, begging and donation website and just social media all over the place all the time with the link to our website. So that's something I write a lot of grants. You know, sometimes they give us, we've never gotten a huge grant. We've gotten, you know, $25,000 here, $5,000, $3,000, you know, and that's something that's why it takes us maybe 3 years instead of every other year to put on this conference, because as the years go by, the prices go up for everything. So, you know, sometimes it takes us 3 years to save to start off with $25,000, you know, and so hopefully this year we're going to write some big money grants and as sex worker rights progresses and we're more acknowledged and more, you know, taken seriously, that we can get some serious money. So, so nobody would have to pay for this fucking conference. So you know, that's my goal. There's Julianna. Yay.
I crashed. Sorry.
Me too.
This technology needs a little
I'm
work.
afraid I personally, I need to log off. I have to go and see to something, but you guys can keep talking. If you have photographs, please feel free to share. But thank you both so much for your time today. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Carry on without me.
Okay, Juliana.
All right. I'm trying to show photos, but it doesn't like me. This is from our Whores Not Wars party.
Where was that at, Juliana?
That was at a space on Congress that one of our members used to rent. It was a storefront, and they rented it as kind of a live workspace. So we used to have events there periodically. It was awesome. That's kind of, oh, here's something from, this is kind of cool. This is from the first, no, it's not the first, but the second festival we did here in Tucson in 2001. This is our, a little shot of our schedule, our program. which was pretty cool. I don't know if anybody's here anymore. I think we're kind of done, right?
No, there's still 17, or there's still 12 people watching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, because I didn't want to.
12
bore
people.
people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friends.
Thank you, everybody. Here's one of our programs from 2002. Let's see what else we got. This is 2003. There's Surgeon down in the bottom corner. And Annie Sprinkle came to that one. It was really fun. That's pretty much all I have that's actually interesting. The rest of it is like newspaper clippings and stuff like that.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think we've been on for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. I think, again, this was really great. And yeah, good luck to everyone who's watching this with organizing and hosting events.
Yeah, everybody, yes, definitely good luck with your organizing. And anybody can always email me at any time. And hopefully there's a way to share my email.
Yeah.
But you can also, yeah, just
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, if you email SWOP-Tucson's Facebook page, that's probably, if you message SWOP-Tucson on Facebook or message me on Facebook if you're my Facebook friend. If not, you might be hard to find me, but maybe through Catherine. But please feel free. I'm happy to offer any help and support I can offer to anybody trying to do some events.
One thing with Desiree Alliance, once we get this conference rolling again, probably either next year or 2018, we'll start organizing. It takes approximately a year of your free time, but I'm available at director@desireealliance.org, or you can get me on Cris Sardinia on Facebook, or Desiree Alliance on Facebook. And if you want to learn organizing from the bottom up, I'll call it out all over social media when it comes time for volunteer time, and learn how to organize a large event from the bottom up. I mean, that's how I started with Desiree. I was an organizer and I was a presenter. So that's something that I got my hands in every aspect of organizing from the ground up, from the money to the volunteers to just everything. And when I became director and I started my own, I did my own conference, I had some great help from Carol Lee, who was a mentor, but now, this conference, she had cancer, so I did it on my own, and it was, it was phenomenal that I remembered all that shit from 2013, but, it just really taught me a lot in learning how to organize from the very beginning. And it really taught me a lot. So when I finally had my own event, I put on the 2013 and the 2016 Desiree Alliance, it was much easier for me to go into it as I learned as an organizer for the, as a presenter and in the 2006 and becoming allies with Desiree Alliance and really becoming a strong organizer in 2010. So that really helped me learn a lot, is just get involved in organizing. And, it's usually for free, but you will learn a lot.
And it's not exactly for free, Cris. You get registration if you actually stick it out and sustain your volunteering for Desiree. So for everyone watching this video live or as a recording, strongly encourage you to volunteer with Desiree Alliance. And for everyone who registered, if you want to send an email responding to the email with a link to this webinar, I'm happy to share Cris and Jules' email addresses if you didn't if you didn't get them listening to the webinar. And on the replay of this webinar, I'm totally, Cris, going to include a link to the Desiree Alliance website, so hopefully you'll get some new, fresh blood. Thanks again, everyone, and good night.